room stank of sweat, tobacco, and the sour scent of hopelessness. A thin cry pierced the heavy air, frail yet stubborn, fighting to exist. In a dim corner of the dirt-floored auction barn, wrapped in a blood-stained scrap of cloth, a newborn girl whimpered. Her skin still pale from the struggle of birth, her tiny body trembling, as if she knew the cruelty of the world she had just entered. She should have been cradled in love, warmed by her mother's arms, yet instead, she was thrust before men who measured lives in coin. The auctioneer's voice, gruff and careless, rang out announcing her like cattle, like a broken tool discarded too soon. "A baby girl, weak, unwanted. Who'll take her off our hands? If you believe no life should begin with cruelty, if you believe in kindness, second chances, and the power of compassion, then please pause for a moment to like this video, share it with others, and subscribe to Stories Collection. Your support helps spread stories that remind the world that even in the darkest places, light can still be found." The bid started low, accompanied by mocking laughter. No one truly wanted her. To most of those gathered men, she was just another mouth to feed, another burden in a world already too hard. Yet, in the shadow of the crowd, a tall, broad-shouldered rancher stood silently, his weathered face unreadable beneath the brim of his hat. His name was Elias McGraw, a man hardened by years of ranch life and the loneliness of wide, empty fields. He had buried his wife 2 winters ago and carried grief in his chest like a stone he could never set down. He had come to the auction not for livestock or tools, but simply because the silence of his ranch had grown too heavy. He hadn't expected to see her. A fragile scrap of life trembling against the cold, abandoned before she could even breathe properly. Something inside him stirred, something he thought had died the day his wife's laughter was buried under the earth. When the bidding fell silent, with no takers, Elias lifted his hand. The men chuckled, whispering that the old rancher had lost his mind. He paid the $2 asked, not because the child was worth so little, but because in that moment, he was the only one who believed she was worth anything at all. When the auctioneer shoved the bundle toward him, Elias cradled her against his chest, feeling the erratic beat of her tiny heart. She was fragile, yes, but alive. Against the coarse fabric of his shirt, she whimpered once, then quieted. As if she had found something she had been searching for all along, safety. Life on the ranch was no gentle lullaby, yet Elias gave her what he could never give to his lost wife. A second chance at life. He cleaned her wounds with hands calloused from years of labor, rocking her beside the old fireplace, as though she were the most precious thing in the world. He named her Rose, after the flowers his wife had loved, and in that act, the ranch that had long felt like a graveyard began to bloom with purpose again. But the world beyond Elias's ranch did not forget Rose's beginning. As she grew into a child with eyes the color of morning skies, whispers followed her. She was the girl from the auction, the girl unwanted from birth. Children taunted her in the small town school, and their parents looked at her with pity or suspicion. Rose bore the cruelty in silence, though Elias's arms were always there to hold her when the tears came. He reminded her that her value was not determined by the cruelty of her beginnings, but by the strength of her heart. Yet as she grew older, the shame she carried threatened to swallow her, making her question if love alone was enough to erase the mark of her past. Elias grew older too, his strong back bending under the weight of years. The ranch that once thrived now struggled with storms, failing crops, and debts piling high. Rose, now a young woman, saw the man who had given her everything wear down like the earth after too many harsh winters. She felt helpless, grateful for the life he gave her, yet unable to give him back the security he deserved. And then came the day the sheriff rode up to their door, papers in hand, demanding payment they could not make. the ranch would be sold, and Elias, the man who had once saved a helpless baby girl, now faced losing everything. Rose's heart broke. For years she had believed her existence had only been a burden, that she was a child of pity rather than choice. But as she watched Elias, too proud to beg, too wary to fight, she realized the truth. He had not bought her to own her, but to save her. And now it was her turn to save him. She worked in town, took small jobs others turned away from. And though the money she earned was barely enough to touch the debt, her determination burned brighter than her fear. She told anyone who would listen of Elias's kindness, of the man who had rescued her from the cruelty of her first breath and raised her with nothing but love. Slowly, the townspeople, once quick to whisper, began to remember the times Elias had lent a hand, fixed a roof, or shared what little he had with neighbors in need. One by one, they came forward. An old farmer with a sack of grain, a widow with coins saved, children carrying baskets of food. The sheriff, moved by the sight, delayed the papers, giving them time. And on the day when it seemed the ranch would finally be lost, the town gathered as one, paying off the debt Elias could not. For the first time in her life, Rose saw what she had always longed for: acceptance. She was no longer the child auctioned off, no longer the girl whispered about. She was the daughter of Elias McGraw, and in saving him, she had found her place in the world. Elias lived to see his ranch restored and his daughter strong. He passed on with peace in his heart, knowing he had not only given Rose life, but also a future. And Rose, with tears in her eyes and love in her chest, continued his legacy, running the ranch not as the girl who was once unwanted, but as a woman who had been chosen, cherished, and made whole by love. If this story touched your heart, if it reminded you that kindness can change the course of a life, please take a moment to like this video, subscribe to Stories Collection, and share it with someone who needs hope today. Your engagement helps us keep telling stories that remind the world of the power of love and second chances. And before we end, special request. Comment below what second chances mean to you and how kindness has changed your life. Your story might inspire someone else to believe again. The air inside that old auction barn was heavy, with more than just dust and sweat. It carried the weight of despair. Men gathered with hardened faces, women with tired eyes, all pressed together in that suffocating space, where human dignity was traded like livestock. The sound of the newborn's cry cut through it all, fragile but insistent, like the faint toll of a bell in a storm. She was not just crying for milk or warmth, she was crying for life, crying to be seen. But instead of arms reaching with tenderness, rough hands passed her along as though she were nothing more than a burden to discard. Blood still clung to her tiny skin, proof that she had entered this world only moments ago, and already the world had turned its back on her. The auctioneer cleared his throat, impatient, as though even speaking of her was an inconvenience. Who'll take the child? A girl, no prospects, no dowry, nothing but a mouth to feed. Start the bidding at $2. His voice was hollow, detached, as though she were a tool rusted too soon, not a breathing soul. In that crowd, laughter stirred. Some jeered, others muttered under their breath, mocking the very idea of paying for a child whose life was destined for misery. But one man did not laugh. Elias McGraw stood at the back, arms folded across his chest, his face lined with years of labor under the punishing sun. He had lost much in life, his wife, his joy, even the sound of laughter echoing through his once vibrant ranch house. Yet when his eyes fell on the child, so small and unwanted, something in him broke open. He remembered the way his wife had longed for children they never had, the way she had once planted roses in the barren earth, believing beauty could bloom even in the harshest soil. The silence stretched. The auctioneer's voice faltered. No takers. Then she goes to the foundling's home, or worse. That was when Elias's hand rose, slow but steady. A murmur spread through the barn, disbelief rippling like a wave. $2 exchanged hands, and the bundle was shoved toward him. When Elias took the child into his arms, she whimpered once, then nestled into his chest, as though she had been waiting for him all along. Against the rough fabric of his shirt, her tiny body relaxed, and in that instant, Elias knew. He had not bought her. He had rescued her. He carried her out of that barn and into a new life. The journey back to his ranch was long and quiet, save for the occasional cry of the child. Elias wrapped her tighter in his coat, whispering a name he had held onto for years, but never spoken aloud. Rose. She would be Rose, after the flowers his wife had loved, after the hope that had once filled his home. The ranch was no paradise, but it was safe. Elias fed her with trembling hands, rocked her beside the fire, and watched her grow stronger day by day. Yet raising a child was not easy, and the whispers from town never ceased. "That's the auction girl," they said, pointing as Rose toddled beside him in the dusty streets. Children mocked her at school. Mothers warned their sons to stay away from the girl with no past. Rose heard every word, though Elias told her again and again that her worth was not tied to their cruelty. She was his daughter, chosen with intention, loved without condition. Still, the shadow of her beginning clung to her like a scar. She grew into a young woman, with strength in her stride and fire in her eyes, but deep inside, she carried a wound that whispered she did not belong. That wound only deepened when the ranch began to fail. Elias's back bent with age, his hands no longer as steady, and the land that once yielded crops grew stubborn and barren. When the sheriff came with papers threatening to take it all away, Rose felt the weight of her existence crash upon her. Was this all she had brought him? Trouble, loss, disappointment. But then she remembered the barn. She remembered the way he had lifted his hand when no one else would. She remembered the warmth of his chest against her cheek, the first moment she had felt safe in this cruel world. And she understood at last Elias had not bought her to own her. He had chosen her, saved her, loved her. Now it was her turn. She worked tirelessly in town, scrubbing floors, mending clothes, carrying heavy loads until her back ached. Every coin she earned, she pressed into Elias's hand. Yet it was not enough. So she began to speak, to tell anyone who would listen about Elias McGraw, the man who had given her a life when no one else cared. At first, the townspeople only nodded politely, but soon, memories stirred. They remembered the rancher who had fixed a broken fence without asking for pay, who had lent his last horse to a neighbor in need, who had never turned his back when others had. Slowly, the tide shifted. People who once whispered now stepped forward, bringing what they could. An old farmer handed Elias a sack of seed. A young widow placed coins in Rose's palm. Children who once teased her now gathered eggs, carried buckets, offered their small hands in work. When the sheriff returned, expecting to claim the ranch, he found a town gathered in unity, standing for one man and his daughter. The debt was paid, not by one, but by many. That night, Elias sat on the porch, the weight of years softened by pride. He looked at Rose, no longer the tiny bundle he had carried from the auction, but a strong, determined woman who had given back what he once gave her life. He passed not long after, his heart at peace, his legacy alive in her. Rose carried on the ranch, her spirit as unyielding as the land itself, her story a testament that love can redeem even the cruelest beginnings. If this story touched your heart, if it reminded you that love and kindness can rewrite the story of a life, please take a moment to like this video, subscribe to Stories Collection, and share it with someone who needs to hear this today. And before we end, special requesty, comment below what second chances mean to you and how kindness has shaped your journey. Your words may be the light someone else is waiting for.